I want to welcome you all. There's a seat down on the end there.
Where?
At the very end of that row.
The front row?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stand right there.
Oh,
If you could hit the one down at the end, that'd be good. Okay, welcome. We're delighted to see you all here. This talk tonight is being presented by the Hartford KTC, which is short for Karma Thegsum Choling. We are one of the branch centers of Karma Triana Dharmachakra Monastery in Woodstock, New York. That is the North American seat of the 17th Karmapa, who is the young man in the picture up behind me. He is the head of the Kagyu lineage, and we are a Tibetan Kagyu lineage center. We are located over at 157 Elizabeth Street in Hartford, near Elizabeth Park, and we have meditation sessions every Tuesday night at 7:30 if anybody's interested in attending meditation and discussion on Buddhism. The talk that is being presented tonight is a talk by Thrangu Rinpoche, Khenchen Thrangu Rinpoche, and he is one of the highest lamas in the Kagyu lineage. He's a scholar. He is the head of two shedras, which are that's a word for basically a university of Buddhism, one in Sarnath, India, and one in Nepal. He has a monastery in Nepal. He has a nunnery in Nepal. He has a school for Himalayan children in Nepal. And he has centers around the world and travels around the world teaching Buddhist philosophy. And he is also the Dalai Lama, and the 17th Karmapa selected him to provide tutoring to the Karmapa as he comes of age. So we're very, very honored to have him here to speak with us this evening. We're going to be starting at about 7:45, which is a little later than we had said. There was huge traffic coming down from Maine. He just came from leading a retreat in Maine. But we will be getting underway at about 7:45, and if you could rest comfortably until then, that would be delightful. So, that's it.
Tene ta terrain ngaran dana yon chenamba kanganje tene tikabla teze tambe chuko ko kamu choju chonla pe gabu chonla tene chenamba kangala jahi deleda tuji che shogeyen la tene tiji sola ngarange tujondo ta dojin chonto no sonde je intengi yorela I'd
like to begin by welcoming all of you here this evening and expressing my sincere delight at having this opportunity to come here to Hartford and to see you all tonight. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming here. And then, as I usually do at the beginning of a talk, I will recite the lineage supplication, and following that, I'll begin to speak a little bit about Dharma.
Salam Chaja Ache Lai Ngai Nipe Nyamen Dunga Da Aboy Gaje La So Wande Soka Aje Lamana Jeban Zenana Ajen Jelo Shen Lo Gom Jeka Ambara Zomba Ya Zenogalaja Ahime Bada Zende Doje Begom Jela Nye Guru Kemba Ameba Jelo Mugu Gom Jengo Awo Somba Ye Menga Dere Gonje Bela Mala Jando Sovande Begom Jela Jume Mugu Jelo Yeme Gom Jeng Yeras Hamba Ye Kankara Do Bengo Awo Somade Maju De Ganjo Abegom Jela Gom Jaloda Antawa Jelo Nam Toingo Vochu Goro Somba Ye Jaya Ma Ye Jaya Jawala Mangai Roba Avegom Jela Konde Yemedo Abara Jelo Jewa Gondo Yo Andai Lamata Dame Jeba Ala Lonje Zadalom Jaya and Harazone Doje Janga Go Ampanyo Dojo Tene ta togung ke kapsula ngarang ki chitang ke ta jambatan niji ke korte shogen la tene ta te ya chitang ke jambatan niji te ta ngarang so chulu 간디지 있나야 되네 잠바단 인지 가르침 보인바 다 되네 잠바단 인지 난게 바데 강가 살보레라 되네 대전들랑아라서 다 담비주 냠네 메진케 남지자 잠바단 인지 대 가르침 보인바라 공기요래 레데 있나야 당하랑게 도공 쉬야티 간디지레세나 야 넘버 산지베게 잠바단 니제 검베게 탑데 데지 다트모마인베 체슈게 맹화 데지 야바텐주 코르데 데지 쇼나 니 텔라테네 제 펜바용그레 선반다보제게 고네 데네 나란소 넘버 산지베 잠바단 니제 검베 솔데 데지 도르두 좀 쇼에.
Tonight, I'm going to talk about the development of love and compassion. In general, of course, the development of love and compassion is essential to the practice of any form of spirituality or any religion, as is fairly obvious. And love and compassion are still essential for people who are not religious or who don't regard themselves as particularly spiritual. Nevertheless, tonight what I'm going to focus on is the particular approach taken to the cultivation of love and compassion by Buddhism, and the particular methods which Buddhists use to develop these.
Tene ta te ya jitang wang de xie na ta ngaran zo sim jin jin ten la sim jin gang ga la je jamba ta ni ji me ba yo ma re la te yin do la te na ne ngaran zo me gang ga la jamba ta ni ji yo re te ye be jun sen ya tene ta ngaran zo namba san ji be ta we wang de xie na sim jin tam ji la 상제제 공통 토픽 누바 되는 나란서 남비 주게라 대화르히비 님보세게 요래라 대화르히비 님보데 센진 탐지게 센지질라 요요래라 대예발라 때네 센진 강가라 센진 이노조다 대전들라 메인로와 탐지라 점바던 니지 요래 라 되네 요래 대 있나야 되네 대라 대시 체슈인다보지 믹살게 공구바 다 시구바 예발라 때네 때네 나란서 남바 산지베 토모마인베 때네 잠바던 니제 공탁게 맹화테 때난게 요래.
First of all, it's important to understand that all sentient beings innately possess some degree of love and compassion. And this therefore includes all people, all human beings. The reason why all of us possess love and compassion as innate qualities or characteristics, according to Buddhism and in the terminology of Buddhism, is that we all have the innate potential for full awakening or Buddhahood. Because this is innate, we therefore call it Buddha nature. And this basic nature, being the nature of all beings or innate to all beings, means that all beings, including all people, naturally have love and compassion. At the same time, while we all possess these qualities innately, they still need to be developed, which means that we need to come to understand them and we need to intentionally cultivate or develop them.
텔라야 다 지당게 나란소 라 데네 잠바다 니지 요레티 이나야 텔라 빵구비게 쟁카리 요레세나 데네 잠바다 니지 데데지 찹자 춘춘다 보제 쇼제라 예바다 쇼제라 매반다고 추린다고 요레라 Tene teacherna ngaranso namba sanjebe mengaga onde sena jamba semita nije semi sungi yorela tene jamba semita nije semi sedu hajang jachemboje sungi yorebe sena mare ona semi sedu kande jire sena tene tela 초제 라 여라 초제 라 매반다고 tene per na ngaran so ge chambata ni je te kap ka la rang cho la ye la yin ji cho la me pan da bo ta yang kap ka la ngaran so ge chambata ni je te per na tun ron da bo la ye la me yin ro la me pan da bo ta kap ka la me yin ro la ye la tun du ge re la yang chambata ni je me pan da bo 대견도 든두게 있나야 되네 껌란 내바도 쵸란 내바다 다 딘데 만다와 된절 카힐라 점바던 니지 예대반다고 카힐라 점바던 니지 메대반다고 다 딘데 제 추린다 보지 용게 와라라 되네 나란소 남바 산지벨로라 댐 추리 메바 탐지라 냠반다 보지 고바임 베체나 세메반다 디가 좀 지요래 디가 좀 지래 요 말에 생긴 게 치매봐. 되니 강가라 냠본다 보던데 점받은 이제 공부 받대 나요래.
The reason why we need to understand and consciously develop love and compassion in spite of the fact that they are innate is that as they naturally abide within us, they are affected by a problem or a flaw. And the flaw in our usual love and compassion is simply that they are limited or partial. We have love for some, but lack it for others. We have compassion for some, but lack it for others. The approach taken to the development of love and compassion in Buddhism is to make it immeasurable. But immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion does not simply mean love and compassion that are immeasurably vast or immeasurably intense. It means that they are immeasurable in being impartial and unlimited. Now, this is quite different from the way that we ordinarily experience love and compassion. As we all know, sometimes we feel love and compassion for those with whom we identify, and not for those with whom we do not identify. Or sometimes we might feel compassion for animals, but not for other people. Or we might feel compassion for people, but not for animals. Or we might feel compassion for some animals, but not for others. For example, we might feel compassionate toward mammals, but not toward fish, and so on. In any case, the Buddhist approach to this is to develop a type of compassion that is equally focused and a type of love that is equally focused on all beings, unlimited and immeasurable in the sense of being utterly impartial.
동점 치매 받대 넘버 예송게 요래 드니 디나네 지당게 다테 검베가 갑라 치매 받대 베 갈체 와래라 드니 지당게 고름다 보지세나 점바 니제 가와 동점 넘버 예레데 이나야 나란소 그 당보 냠슬렘베 갑슬라 간디 냠슬렘 그거세나 당보 점바다 니제 마감바 드니 동념 치매 강고 그래 되는 송이 와래라 드니 디 존생인데 간디 지레세나 공도 휴바견들 나란솔 점바던 힌지지 요래 다 대라 가리고 그래서나 치매 받대 베베한테 갈침보 임베잖나 드니 당보 동념 강 점바대야 마감바지 힌지대야 마감바지네 드니 동념 더버지 gambare tonyam te gam gubi junsen te choche la chamba compel to sona choche la te si hedan da bota ne pan da bo yungju gi nyen kha yore la tene junsen ti chena te ta bu pone ta ngarang choche la chamba da ni ji hyo chim bo ji se ne choche la te la pembe gi che to yan ne pan da bo je yungju gi nyen kha yore la te pang be gi che to la cho tham je la tonyam che mixal ke chamba ya sa te na ya chamba ma gam ba che mixal ke hedan da ne se mi sa te la ne se me ba che tham ji dong ni dong nyam to gam ne kang ga nyam ba gang Gambatella, Tinite, Tonyam Gambatella, Tonyam Teon, Tonyam Se Mebate, Sojela Yapaton, Sojela Meba Maimba, Tamchela, Chamyam to Gomnangea, Namatella, Tambo Tonyam Semigongre.
The particular method that is used in the Buddhist tradition for the cultivation of love and compassion, specifically immeasurable love and compassion, is called the cultivation of the Four Immeasurables. And what are called the Four Immeasurables are immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable empathetic joy, and immeasurable impartiality. Now, when you actually practice these, you don't practice them in that order. The order is given in that way customarily, but you can't start the practice of these by meditating on love and compassion. You have to start by meditating upon the fourth immeasurable, which is impartiality. The reason is that, as we've seen, we all already possess some degree of love and compassion. What we need to develop, first of all, is the impartiality. Because until you develop impartiality, if you cultivate love and compassion, while you will probably increase the intensity of your love and compassion for those you already feel concern for, without impartiality, you will correspondingly increase your aversion, anger, or actual hatred toward those you don't already feel concern for. So therefore, before you begin to meditate on or cultivate love, before you begin to cultivate compassion, you need to start by cultivating impartiality. And impartiality is cultivated by cultivating a state of mind in which you do not allow yourself to feel concern for some to the exclusion of others. You do not allow yourself to exclude any being from your concern, and you try to cultivate an evenness or equal amount of concern toward all beings.
Tene ta te tabu tongyang gong ne je, tene chamba de je chadong ga namba namba ma yinba, kanga tongyam rabu je chang na, tene di tayin do chamba ta nyi je gong gre la, tene ta te yang chamba ta nyi je te la, chitang ga chamba ta nyi je nipo te kal che ge yore, re la. Titain dola kare gogre se na tene chambata ninje te la tro te hirap tang tempa che tene hirap tang tempa che gogre ma to chambata ninje te ge tro la hirap te me na chambata ninje ye na ya kapka la tene parupo te la ma ba parupo te la kapka la ne pa yong se gre la tene te yendola kapka la rang la ne pa yong sigre tene chamba tan hi je hirap tan temba che chong na tene parupo la ngene mane pa che ta ngene pen pa che yong yin be cher na tene chitang chamba tan hi je gamba te kal che gre la te la ya hirap tan temba te be kal che gyo.
Once you have cultivated a state of impartiality to the point where your subsequent development of love and compassion will not become the cultivation of a state of attachment for some and aversion for others, then on the basis of that impartiality you go on to actually cultivate love and compassion. Now, in general, of course, in this cultivation, the love and compassion themselves are what is most important. But along with these, you need to cultivate discernment or insight. And if discernment does not accompany the development of love and compassion, then they themselves can become problematic. The exercise of love and compassion without discernment or insight can sometimes be unhelpful to those you are trying to help. In fact, sometimes it can actually be harmful, or it can be harmful to yourself. On the other hand, if you accompany the practice of love and compassion with discernment, then you will not harm others and will actually be able to help them. So therefore, discernment has to be part of the development of love and compassion themselves.
다 대야 잠바다 니지니라 히랍 메나 깝깔라 때스 깔레 가본다고 용 그래 베지 옛나 당하랑게 니지지 율 셈진제 동할 용게 요나 되네 바로 보디 sentinti 동할 용게 요라라 되네 나라 텔 니지지 그래 니지지나야 바로 보게 동할 때 잘위게 탑때 나랑 제 두개요 말해라 대체 마도디 되네 나라야 셈바죠 펜토는 가야 매바제 셈도 되네 디체나 바로 보때야 동한용 나라야 동한용 나라니까 동한용 마도 되게 나랑게 팔라 펜토요 마 파죠 그 쏠라 펜토요 말에 디체나 되네 잠바던 hin제데 베 탑둑나 보지 용기 와라라 드니 데이터부 탑둑데 마인 바제 드니 베 문에 바로 볼라요 펜 토바제 바로 볼라 펜 토발라 때는 나라야 베셈바 가주여 바다 지주여 바제 인지민지 드니 잠바던 인지데 히라던 담바지 그래.
The reason why discernment is essential in the development of love and compassion is that love and compassion that are practiced or exercised without discernment can lead to all kinds of problems. For example, let's say that you give rise to compassion for someone. The object of your compassion is a being, a person, whom you observe to be suffering. You feel compassion for them. However, lacking discernment in the situation, there is nothing effective that you can do to actually help that other person. At the same time, you have become acutely aware of their suffering and also acutely aware of how ineffectual you are in that situation. Therefore, the result of your development of compassion without discernment is that you don't succeed in helping the other person, and you are now suffering as well, to the point where you start to become depressed through having compassion. So, before you developed compassion, there was one person miserable, and now there are two people miserable. This type of love and compassion is actually useless or even destructive. Compassion needs to contain the discernment which makes it possible for you to actually benefit effectively the object of your compassion, at least to the extent where you are satisfied with what you have done and therefore experience compassion as a joyful state rather than a state of depression.
되네 다 될라 간데지 히랍동 덴바데 간데지레 레세나 당가란 속에 디 숭 갑슬라 셈지 탐지 대화당 덴바제 다 셈지 탐지 대화를 끄고요래 대화를 끄톱나 나랑게 대화를 끄고요래 대화를 끄고바제다 되네 대화를 끄 마톱나 가리고요래세나 देवी जोदान टेम्परेचर जे सेदु ता नेका देवाला के थुगमंदु ते हिनया ते देवी जोला के थुबना तिनी तेला तेने माउपाला खोरा खोराइना खाइना ते देवा थोगरेला टीचरना देवा चंबा सेबा तेलाया खाही नेका ला पेबा खाही के चंबा ते थारतु ला पेबा तेने तेताब देवी जोला खातुला के मातुबनाया माउपाला तेने के थुबगे मेलमजंब जाप तेने सेना खादु इनाया ngarange chambata hinji chamba yona तेने माउपाला तीके फेंबाते खादु इनाया तांग थुगे योरेला तेताब देवाता देवी जोदां ते परचुरचेस तेजेंदला hinji के ओंद सेना dungal ji जोदां टावर चुरचे सुवारेला तेने फारुपोते नेका ngarange dungal de खाही साल थुबा युंगे योरेला dungal de साल थुबा जी योना ते साल ngarange hinji जे या कावकाला dungal de साल मतुब dungal योरेला तेला इनया 가래 타기 세고 요래서나 간바 니바데 보온도 데라 dungal 타와다 dungal ji जोदां 타워제 dungalji jode tanda tal tugu menna maung pala remji tar tubaji sepa 대답을 림비게 감바제 감바니 감바섬 림비게 보나 카히 단다 팽도 봐요. 카히 마음발라 팽도 봐. 카히 마음발라 팽도 봐요라. 드니 티처나 단다 좀 니지 니 히랍던 템바 간디지 고요아레세나 대와다 대위 조단 템퍼처지 둥할지 조단 타워 처지 tene teya dewi joyi on de siena tene nekap dungal nyong yo na ya te somba zangbotan jambatan hinjetan tembachi parupo tela chena rimbi ki koran mahompala yapon roge yore hirap tan tembachi na mahompala rimbi yapon roge yore te gendo dungal tan tawa tela ya te nekap dungal tan tal thup na ya rong nekap dungal tan tal mathup na ya rimbi dungal tan tal we ki jote la chen na tene rimbi ke mahompala dungal tan tal thup yore.
Now, what exactly does discernment mean in this context? It means understanding the actual situation of what is possible in terms of loving and compassionate action. The attitude of love is understood in the Buddhist tradition as being an aspiration for the happiness of another. And therefore, the attitude of immeasurable or impartial love is the aspiration that all beings, without exception, be happy. The implementation of discernment in the context of immeasurable love is the understanding that in some cases you may be able to make someone else happy immediately. But even when you cannot do that, you can bring about the causes of that person or that being being happy in the future. So the element of discernment introduced into immeasurable love is adding to the aspiration, making it not merely may all beings be happy, but may all beings be happy and possess or accumulate the causes of happiness. Sometimes you can bring about immediate happiness, and sometimes you cannot. But you can always do something to bring about the future, ultimate or eventual happiness of that being. If you cannot immediately transform that being's state of misery into happiness, you can at least, through the force of your aspiration, bring about their future benefit. So therefore, that aspect of discernment enriches the quality of immeasurable love and makes it appropriate and effective. In the same way, the attitude of compassion is understood as the desire or aspiration for another being to be free from suffering. Therefore, immeasurable compassion is the aspiration that all beings be free from suffering. Sometimes you can remove some suffering directly and immediately, but there is much suffering that you cannot immediately remove. However, you can always do something to remove the cause of that suffering. So therefore, the introduction of the element of discernment into immeasurable compassion is the aspiration being, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. In that way, through the introduction of discernment into love and compassion, there's an understanding that the implementation of these is a step-by-step process in which some people can be benefited immediately and directly, some gradually and in the future, and some only indirectly and in the distant future. But there is always something that can be done. So in that way, through discernment, these attitudes of love and compassion become far more appropriate and far more effective.
Tene ta te tabu ge chambatan hinji te gomna tene te chambatan hinji te tap dupun rapa maimba be ngarang ki kyang tene kahela neka pentoba 카헤라 렘지렘지 펜 토반다보지 고갑 톱니 테니 테라 제 셈바 쪼니 데반다보 마이바 나랑라 파르보디 데와 톰데 로요와레라 티 데와라 께 투바 단다 야나 단다 께 투바 야나 마옹발라 께 투바 야나 렘지렘지 께 투바 다인다보지 토바임베 임바제다 둥할단 트라와일라야 데타르도 다인다보지 토바임베 쳬르나 테니 잠바데 jambatang hinji de semba cho depanda ma imba ngene san gawata toya deba ta ngarang chi ping tho to thu gre da nge to thup so khahela tanda to ma do na yo ma pa la to thu gre da sambe ge samla popanda bota sanla dainda boji ya pa imbe cherna tini tela ngaraya san gawayung yo rela parubote ya tini tandang ngu su dungal le chap thup dewala ke thup na san gawayung yo re tini teginda tanda chap matu na yo maung pala chap thupi kokap chona tini ti san gawayung yo rela tini teacher na drebu go on the sena gawachi mete the gawachi me pate tini ndor na tangbo tongyam chemegam ti jesu samba chemegam ti jesu hije chemegam tini tela tene tartu gundrebu gawachi minjo ta tindege go ne ta tela tezi mengonda bota tomoma imbe cheshunda bo yore.
When love and compassion are cultivated in that kind of insightful way, then they are never experienced by the person who's cultivating them as ineffectual. They always have some kind of benefit, either immediate or long-term. Therefore, love and compassion are not understood or experienced as depressing or sources of sadness. Because any state of insightful love or compassion is in some way always effective. It will either bring immediate benefit to the object of your love and compassion or eventual benefit. And the recognition of that, the understanding of that, inspires confidence. So therefore, as your confidence in the effectiveness of love and compassion increases, they become states that are inherently joyful and not depressing at all. When you recollect the action of love to bring about the happiness of others, you can reflect upon the fact with confidence that in some cases you have directly helped others be happy, and in other cases you have at least created the causes for those others to be happy in the future. When reflecting upon the action of compassion to protect others from suffering, in some cases you can recollect that you have protected others directly from suffering, and in other cases that you have created such a situation that you will be able to prevent their suffering in the future. So the final result of the insightful cultivation of love and compassion is impartial joy, the four immeasurable. And the fourth immeasurable, impartial or immeasurable joy, is a state where you experience the empathetic joy of benefiting others in an impartial way. So in that way, the methodical instructions of the Buddhist tradition for the development of love and compassion start with the cultivation of impartiality. Then they are completed with the practice of love and compassion themselves, which bring as a result the achievement of immeasurable joy.
Tene ta te tabuge zo ta jambata hinji de compel to tongu yorela te compel to tong kapsala ngaranchu kandi sin compel to tangu yore se na tene ta te ya ngaranchu gombe mengo yorela tene te neka pelia gombe mengo te la kandi yore se na tene ngaranchu gendondo senjin kahi inayanda senjin mambo inayanda te tabu senjin te yepala somne tene ngarangi tene tanda ngarangi dewa ta ngarangi gewata ngarangi sonam la soba tenzo senchin tenzo la pa jimbatangi par jinjogi yin samba par tangi yin samba tang tene ta tenzo ge dungal ta tene je megewa la soba tenzo ngarangi chor len jogi yin samba ta tela tonwa tan lemba tonlin sekre la tene ti tonlin nibo te pelne tangbo pa jimbatang tene chor len tene pa tang tene chor len tene sene tetse gamna tene tige ngune ngarange jambatang nije te pala ngune tang semta boda chor la dungal le tamde ge lo te pe shou cher ro yore.
Within this process, of course, the main part of it is actually intensifying love and compassion themselves. And there is a method for doing this that leads to an immediate increase in the intensity of love and compassion. The method is to imagine an object of love and compassion in front of you. Now, this can be one other being or many other beings. It doesn't matter. And with a clear image of that person in front of you, you simply think that you are giving them, that you are willing to give them, all of your happiness and everything within you that is a cause of happiness, such as your virtue and so forth. That you give all of this to them. And you also think that you accept from them, that you are willing to take away from them and into yourself all of their suffering and all of the causes of their suffering, such as their wrongdoing and so forth. Usually these two are practiced in alternation. You first think that you are giving everything, all of your happiness and so forth, to the other or the others, and then that you are taking from them all of their misery and so forth. And through cultivating this meditation, which is normally called taking and sending, or sending and receiving, you directly increase the intensity of your love and compassion.
Tene ngaranzo ula tene gongku ba tene song yorela tene ngaranzo tujundo o pa tawa to o chorong ba ta tene chege yorela tene te tujundo la ta ngaranzo o pa tawa to chorong ba tela je jitang lubo soya chege tendare ma to tela je pemba ja chenbon juya ga jo kaya yo marela tene tanda ngaranzo ge jambata nije peleada Chambata Nijem Perial Tene, Rankin Senchi Mambola, Pain Topa, Jela Juriak Tantala, O Par Town Capsula, Tening Aranga Sonamta, Gewata, Dewatin so Par Senchina, Jimbata in Sambata, Par Town in Sambata. Tening Aranga Mikbala, O the Par Town Castle, Carbogan number La Pandoa. Tene O the Surungup Capsula, Tene Parupo Senchin Dungalta. Tene mende batenzo chor tene jeng hombo ton napu ge nambala chor duanda boje ge nambala chor ngupa tende gomne tate gomna yang pa nga chor ta chor ngup ta tende se de pa ta chor ngup de la jarne gomna tene te se gom dewanda bo yong yore.
As for how you actually do this in practice, the traditional instruction is to coordinate the meditation with the natural cycle of your breathing. And the reason for this is simply that it is convenient, because we always breathe. We have to breathe in and out in order to stay alive. So you might as well make some use of it. Therefore, the rhythm of the breathing is used as the basis to establish the rhythm of the meditation of taking and sending. Specifically, breathing out is coordinated with the meditation of giving. So as you breathe out, you think that flowing out of you together with your breath is all of your happiness, all of your virtues, and so on, which are given to the other being or beings whom you are imagining. Usually, it's helpful to imagine all of this virtue and so forth as something that's very, very bright, like a very, very bright light. And then when you breathe in, you think that you are taking into yourself, with the in-breath, all of the suffering and all of the causes of suffering that afflict that other person or those other persons. And usually you imagine it as something depressing and grim, like smoke and something like that. And in that way, you combine the image of giving and the image of taking with your breathing.
Tene ta te tabu gom kapsula yang kapkala ngaram sola tesi jikto ndabu jege yore karire sena ngarang ke tinde gom ne ngarang ke dewa te patang tene yeng dunghal de chor thong do long na ngarang la dewa tang gewa la so ba kaya me ba je dunghal number na so ba parchi tang jeng ba ye ba je yung gre yung sare som ben jikto ndabu yung yore te yung yore kapkala Kaukalan jitran dabu yume masi paga tene te chei kaukala te si ching ngamba dabu tepe kaula o nga tha te tongling gamba la tene chung song samba dabu jaya un sigre la tene te un sigre de ina te tongling gamba la tene chung mare la yunge mare te la ching ngamba dabu tsani yung mare jonsen karire se na tene senching dewa tang dunghal senke te susu ge le nanje ledang charji jingla tene yung yore mato tene te ngarang ngwa ne par te ga ji yo mare la ngwa ne sur len ga ji yo khaya len to pan da tende yo mare la teacher na ngarang la tongling gam phesa mare sam pan da ta tongling gam ne chen chung sung sam pan da tende khaya go ga mare la wona ta tende parte ya da sur len ya khaya me na tongling gone kari pengre ta tongling gone til guba kari yore sona til guba yore kari yore se na tongling gamba te narang pa nekab ge dewa te ada dunga chur lenya ge tandla tongling gong ge yomare wona kang chidul gong ge yore se na narang jamba tang hinji senjin tamji la senjin tamji dunga le chamde ge lo te da dewa la kende ge lo te hyuk chenpo che ngarang sambatan hinji te pel to ba che sambatan hinji pel ya te ya kha cham chik cham ma yin ba yin khong rupi te ne sambatan hinji ya bo ji je ya ga thap la te gong ge wa la teacher na tongling gamba la te ne sambatan hinji hyuk chenpo pel ke re sambatan hinji hyuk chenpo pel wa la te ne phen thog ma re si yo ma re la rang la te ne sambatan hinji yo na te ne kha du phen top ko ka chang na phen top to ba yung
Sometimes when people practice taking and sending as a meditation, they start to experience anxiety or even fear. They think, well, if I imagine this, maybe it's really going to happen. Maybe I will actually lose all of my happiness and all of my virtue. Maybe I will actually take onto myself or into myself the wrongdoing and misery of others. Maybe I'll start to experience illness or a stream of bad luck and so on. Sometimes people, when they're practicing this, are disturbed by this worry. And sometimes when something goes wrong in their lives, they think, oh, it's because of that meditation of taking and sending. I've actually taken on the wrongdoing of others and it's afflicting me. Well, this is utterly impossible. It simply can't happen. The happiness and misery of beings as individuals, so of any individual being, is a result of that being's previous actions as causes and proximate circumstances as conditions. So, other than resulting from the causes and conditions of actions and circumstances, you cannot really acquire suffering by breathing it in or actually give happiness to someone else by breathing it out. So there's no need to worry about the practice of taking and sending causing you any kind of illness or disaster. You might then wonder, well, if it doesn't work, what use is it? It doesn't work in the sense that you don't practice taking and sending in order to immediately give your happiness to others and immediately take upon the misery of others. As we've just seen, it can't do that. You practice it in order to increase your willingness to do so. By increasing that, you increase or intensify your love and compassion for others. By intensifying your intention to bring happiness to others and protect them from suffering, then this intention becomes much more than just words, much more than just something you think you should feel. And when that intention becomes that genuine, then even though the meditation in itself does not directly affect others, you will naturally be helpful. You will naturally find and make use of opportunities to actually help others. So while the practice of taking and sending does not directly in and of itself affect others, indirectly it benefits others tremendously.
Tene ta te yandala jito gugi yo marete inaya jito te mixal ke pamp ke chetula tene ngarang ke kopen han la je we kabon da je gam tene we kabote ya te se sabon da boda je riza sabo top chembon da je gam ne tene ngarang ke par dewa jimbe kapsala we kabote ndone senjin tonji dewa tan temba chongsongata sur ngop kapsala tini toanda bote rimbi ke kopna la onni we kabote sik sonda bote yal sonda bote de gamna tini tela tene chitanga jito mechewa tini topa mezawa pe pengi ware la tini tejendo la jay dedu toning mi pa gamna khatu la dunga de length pa yung yo mare te ina yo samba sangbo singite kulhon sangbo te pe top down tempare la ngene kapka la phemba yung sigre la tini kapka la ne kap ma phin na yo tini thartu ngune thane ke phento ja chembo yung yo ware la tini junsin teacher na ngaranso namba sanji ke pe menga la ne kap tini chambata ni je pelu ke thapla dedu toning ke mi patinde nang yo ware.
While the fear that practicing taking and sending might actually lead to disaster or problems is unnecessary, if you are nevertheless afflicted by it, which means that while you're practicing, even though you know there's nothing to be afraid of, you still can't let go of the fear just by realizing it, then you can add another element to the meditation itself in order to dispel that. During the meditation, imagine that inside your body is a very brilliant light, and that light is actually hot, such that if you were to physically touch that light, it would feel hot to the touch. When you breathe out all of your happiness and virtue, you think that the brilliant light that represents that happiness and virtue is projected from that brilliant light within your body. And when you breathe in the misery and negativity of others in the form of smoke or whatever, you think that as it is brought into your body, it is burnt away or consumed or destroyed by that brilliant and intensely hot light within you. And adding this element to the meditation will help significantly in dispelling any anxiety or fear that the meditation otherwise leads to. Now, as we've discussed, the meditation itself is not immediately going to affect others. it is not immediately going to remove their suffering or help them add to their states of happiness. Nevertheless, the aspiration, the intention or altruism of love and compassion, which the meditation cultivates, is very powerful in and of itself. So while it is impossible that the imagery of the meditation could affect others directly, the love and compassion that you cultivate just might. So it is possible, in another sense, that the practice could beneficially affect others. But even if it does not, it still always will lead to an intensification of your love and compassion, and therefore is the central method used in the Buddhist tradition for the cultivation of these.
Tene ta tegendla tanda ngaranso ge ya tanda number sanji pala jitang ge tando da ngo number ni yore la tene so ho doje tipi ge on tsena jitang ge tanda dedu tongling mi patinde nang ge yore semi ye gong ge yore la ya tel mixal ge tap chepra chenji yore la tap chepra chen de kari yore sena tene te ya 다 파파 찐레세데 테네 상지에당 장주 선바탐지 그 니지 원다 보질라 요래라 테네 대 나랑 속에 테네 검네 대 검베게 출용 간데 제게 요래세나 테네 단다 공도 휴바 현돌라 나랑 속라 잠바탄 니지 모데 테네 상지에게 힘보 상지기 힘보다 나란츠 샘지 된도 요래라 디 예바 현들라 단다 나란츠 탐말 반다보 마임바 나란라 파파 찐리지 꾸임발 감네 되는 파파 찐리지 꾸인 섬네 뭐바시네 되니 디게 토카네 웨즈르 만다와 트르네 되니 신진 yenje 둥할 텐조 살와 대현들라 tene chi nyuwa ge nepa tenzo ya rimji salwe ge mikpanda poche xe na tene tela tene narang ke che senchin kanga la pen to tuge re sombe popanda pote che tang ke cherun toge yoba che ta tene te yenda la senchin tangche la pen to gu somba ta tene se ne na chi kanga la che yapo ji zo gu sombe ge sem ge nuhu nda pote sem ge moba te cherun toga te tabu cherun wala teni tabdang xerab ge rimbi ge maungpala pen topa yungi yore la teni teya teni ngaranzo tanda ta songho doje tipi onda sena teni jenreze jiko gomne wezir todo teni chege yore.
Within the Buddhist tradition in general, there are two approaches or two traditions within the tradition. And these are often called the tradition of the sutras or discourses and the tradition of the tantras. And sometimes these practices are just called sutra and tantra. Now, the practices that we've discussed, the development of the Four Immeasurables and the practice of taking and sending, are common to both the Sutra and Tantra. In the practice of Tantra or Vajrayana specifically, these practices are therefore done very much. But there is an additional method which is employed to intensify this development even further. And that is to visualize yourself, the practitioner, as the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig. Now, Avalokiteshvara is the embodiment in one figure or one form of the love and compassion of all Buddhas. It is appropriate to identify yourself with this figure because, as was mentioned earlier, your basic nature, like that of any sentient being without exception, is Buddha nature. And in identifying yourself with Avalokiteshvara, you are identifying yourself with that basic nature, that potential. Visualizing yourself as the Bodhisattva you then think that brilliant multicolored light emerges from your heart and pervades and illuminates the entire world. Doing this type of meditation increases your confidence, not only in the presence of love and compassion within you, but in your actual ability to effectively implement love and compassion and thereby benefit others. It also increases your concern with doing so, your altruistic motivation. So therefore, in the Vajrayana or Tantric tradition, the meditation upon this deity in coordination with the radiation and gathering of rays of light is done in coordination with the application of various methods and the continued cultivation of discernment in order to further intensify love and compassion.
다 되게 단다 지당게 세미 예검다 드니 디된들 동린 세다 드니 디된들 송호도지 티빌로라 드니 파파친리세게 고검다 다보다 딘데 슈바이나 도공대 좀치나 데데지 야 카시 두한다보능데요나 나로나.
So this evening what I've tried to introduce to you is the cultivation of the Four Immeasurables in general, especially the practice of taking and sending in order to cultivate love and compassion, and beyond that, the basic idea of meditating upon yourself as the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara according to the Vajrayana tradition. And having said that much, I will stop. And if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask, please go ahead.
Hello. Regarding love and compassion for all sentient beings, I was curious to know if our venerable guest is a vegetarian. If yes, why? If no, why not? Thank you.
Jamba da ninje ko shu chempo song sane kon kadri shu ju ji yores. Dene romashe sodrum chogere pe chogemares. Sodrum ma choke nyena ma chope ke jutsen kan yore dang sodrum choke nyena de sodrum chu chopa ke jutsen kan yore.
Tela chitang ta tawanda na ba ni yore la. Tene tanda chitang tene sanji chomdende jembe kabla ngaranso namba sanji bege jebala khande yore sena tati lotongtra jinyi ge kongla rela tene tige chowa de tab debo si bichedla senyom long yore la senyom long kapsala tene kharipu na ti yege yore yapo phuna ti yapo ti yege yore dubu phuna dubu ti yege yore rela khan phuna de yego gre mato nga chran de te na yapo ren de mate na nga sag me sen de rig mare la ti chen na kanga yege yore la tene ti ji ne tene tanda tambe chue de rimbi ke number sanji bi chue de tene pa ta cham da ma jansu gun dom da ta tendela jana na tene te tansam jana ga sansam janso ye pata tende dom chuchimbo ye pata tende dom rogo yo rela tene tige kapsala tutup tenjuge tene tutup tenjo ta chunyam ne nang tenjuge shasa ma shuso wa sha maza karele sene senji mambo seafood sana pe mesi demaje ke nala tene jatham ba sai ga yo rela tene tel tene maza na ya por he samne tene sha maza ba ge de temper tene ya bella tene bella sanji ke temba tarwarela tene dikasla tene shasawa la gago hira manaware karele sene simji chimbu ke shasaga yorela tene tache mochen raboje sana ya tela yang ngote mata beka ta choko beka la boda bo chungchu mambo hiu ge nyan ka yore la senjin ti se ga na senjin chimbo ya je se na ya de ge tene meje ge lo je la sa yan da bo jin dang ge yore la tene teacher na ti sha de ta de saya de ya de je ngarang ke chi se ban da ma yin ba ngarang ke ngu se ba ma yin ba ta ko ra shi song wan da bo ta de yin ge se sim ba da bo ta de ina de saya da bo na re la de ya sa yo ka sa la je se ji de la ngwe ne ni je song be ge ni je ya bo je je de ban lam ya bo je ja ni sha de sa ge yo re.
What are you laughing at? Nothing's been translated yet. I hope you laugh when it's translated. You may not. What Rinpoche said was, there are two views about this. By this, I mean the relationship between the vegetarianism and the Buddhist tradition historically. Actually, to look at the whole situation, we have to go back to the beginning of the Buddhist community. 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha appeared in this world and Buddhism began as a religion, he established a code of behavior which was appropriate at that time for the Buddhist religious community. And one of the cornerstones of that lifestyle was that for the sake of simplicity, the community begged for its food. And one of the rules surrounding begging was, you take what you're given. In other words, if you're going to beg for your food, you can't say, I'll take this, but I don't want that. You can't be choosy. So the basic rule for Buddhist eating dating back to the Buddha was, you can't be choosy. If you're going to beg, you take what you get and you eat it. Now, subsequent to that, over the centuries, Buddhism spread throughout India and throughout much of Asia. And as it spread, it changed from being pretty well entirely an inland religion to being a religion that was partly connected to the oceans, which meant that as it spread to China and various other countries, it spread to places where people ate seafood and fish. This was the point where many Buddhist teachers in several countries started extolling the benefits of vegetarianism. And the reason for this was simply that if you eat seafood, you're eating many more beings per meal than if you eat large mammals. When Buddhism spread to Tibet, however, vegetarianism was not much mentioned. For one thing, the meat consumed in Tibet tended to be the meat of a yak, which is an animal that's large enough that one yak can feed one person for at least 1 year, which means that you're actually involved in less killing than you are if you consume entirely a diet of things that have to be harvested, which involves the killing of lots of smaller animals. The basic rule that's common, however, to all these traditions is, according to the Buddha, you are allowed to eat meat provided that you have not specifically ordered or requested that that animal whose body or part of whose body you are eating be killed for your use. If the animal was already killed before you acquired, that is, received or bought the meat, you may eat it.
To effectively practice this practice, would it be ideal to know the characteristics of Avalokiteshvara? And if so, what are those characteristics? And maybe that's something we can't cover here, but...
By characteristics, do you mean what he looks like or his nature?
Both.
The chenrezege mekpa de nyamsu lambala chenrezege namba dang chenrezege ngo yapo go dos detso kandare do
tene ta tela ya chitang ta kap la kahe ge samna la sinkin de chilo le yore la sinkin de yenda jere tene tela solwa tap tela chapa pul tela yapusi na la tige yapusi gre samanda bo tawa yore la tene kahe ge sena la sinkin de chilo la zani yo mare nalo le yore nalo le yapate gamne jaise na mado chilo la ta program sinkin da bo zani yo mare samanda bo la ta ngaran su song doji typical la tene china nikali yore karire se na ngarang niji gi ngo de te dain la ta maho palam phel chopa che chamba ta niji ngo de tene rikam dewar ki bi nimbo yore la tene te takpa yin samne takpa kinre se jikor gomna ya yar ndogre ma to nga mada pa yin nga nye mo pa yin samne dubo se na te yapo lan ndog yo mare la ti cherna rang chamba ta niji yam pheya ke chetla ya kinre se gom ge yore la tene te yendala ya chanchu semba sanje ta chanchu semba tenzo tu niji chimbu gong ge yore la te gomba te la ngarang ge sorwa tap melam japna khonam be ge te se parchi tan chingem ba salya ta china thobiya ge nupa na bu yong ge yore la ti cherna sanje ta chanchu semba tamchi ge tu niji te kinre se ji ngo yin samba gamne ya sorwa tap melam jap tende chege yore tin nomba khande gong ge yore se na kinre se te tene kondo karbo yimba hindu hiwa hindu zomda jeba jen ni de tene sewe go ne zeide ba ta tende da bo je hyap doji chil motom gi yupa tembo yimbe ge tan hyap doji chil motom gi yupa ta tende rang kinre se ji kor gom na ya tende gong ge yore chilo la kinre se ji ko gom na ya tende gong ge yore.
Well, first of all, about the notion of meditating on the deity at all. When you talk about deities, usually people understand it in one of two ways. Some people regard deities, including the deities that are used in the practice of Vajrayana Buddhism, as being external entities or external beings. And therefore, thinking of these deities as being external, they think, well, if I worship this deity, if I make offerings to this deity, if I please this deity, then they will give me something. And what it is you want them to give you is the qualities that you want to attain or acquire. And other people think of deities in a radically different way. They think a deity is nothing external. It's simply the embodiment of my own internal nature or qualities. And therefore, there is no help to be looked for from outside. It has to come from within. Well, in fact, in the Vajrayana tradition, we look at it both ways at once. The deities are understood as being equally internal and external. You can definitely say that a deity such as Avalokiteshvara is internal because love and compassion, which he embodies, are innate to you, because your basic nature is what Buddhists call Buddha nature. And the way the qualities within you work is that the more you respect them, the more you believe in them, the more evident they will become. Therefore, if you regard your innate being or nature as pure, as compassionate, as Avalokiteshvara, then these qualities of love and compassion will radically increase. If you regard yourself as impure, as flawed, and so on, they will remain dormant or apparently decrease. That is why you identify yourself with the figure of the deity. But a deity like Avalokiteshvara is not merely internal, because all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as awakened beings, definitely possess great compassion. Therefore, if you pray to them, if you supplicate them, there is blessing in that. There is some kind of help from outside. So therefore, if you regard all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as being Avalokiteshvara, there is benefit to be derived from that as well. So therefore, the nature of the deity of Avalokiteshvara is both something that is within you and something that is external to you. As far as his appearance, he is brilliant white in color, utterly luminous, and very, very tranquil in appearance. His eyes in particular gaze with an expression or an affect of unceasing and all-seeing compassion. And he's usually seen as with his legs fully crossed in Vajra posture, which usually people call lotus posture, and which represents stability. And you could visualize yourself, you would visualize yourself in that way, or also externally as well.
My question comes back to what you first mentioned about impartiality of compassion, and I'm sure that you have a great experience from your experience in Tibet and the people who've left Tibet. And I guess my own question is my own experience, which is nowhere near as intense as that could possibly be, but I find myself in a position surrounded by intense aggression and evil and intense greed, and I find it very difficult to feel much compassion for the people who are very, very aggressive on the roads and evil in many ways, and intense greed. And I find myself failing in the ability to send and take with people who feels there's a superiority and a strength and a power. These are powerful people. They are people in power. They're rich people. They're very, and how part of me says that I should stay there and work with this, and this is my teaching, is to find compassion where it's very, very difficult, rather than moving to somewhere where there might be less aggression and greed, where then you could there would be less need. You could work on compassion on a different level. But it's just very, very difficult for me to feel compassion for people who are that aggressive. But I guess I'm just stating that I'm failing, and would like some guidance. My inclination is to leave this place and go to somewhere less.
Beji netso tado yena bepa sheke ninji tseme dan jamba tseme gomto na tena halaya res kare jene bela dupo jongwa res bela be chigi dupo jongwa latene res den san de chori mepe de ninje dan jansem gomto na tena halaya res gedo korang de na jen zotugumendos korang ge de desa de la pe me control Shedang Chenpo, Nesem Chenpo, Yuke Mombo Yos. Tene Konso Yoshin the Koran Konso la Ninje Chat Bekale Yores. Tene Tab Ni Daudos. Yana Koran Data Yosa la Dena, Tene Konso Ninje Gom Eto la Gangtutu Zona, the Ninje Gom Kamo Yores. Yana Koran Ninje Gom Le Lasa la Dona. Dene ninje che le lava de sola ninje che segedo con desa ge kola tes lagi obada
Tene ta tela ya pe ne go ta tanda kashi ge tene jambata ninje gom tugu yore kashi gom tugu yo mare ta je do gom tuba da matuba den yo mare la te gom matup na ya rimbi ge te gom tubandavo rimbi ötop matup tane te rimbi jambata ninji chier tayandavo tende kashi chege yore la tene korang ki cha tene chitang ngarjin yepa ta tende ina tene ninji gom ötop matup tena ya hira yapore la 다 다가랑 데 이제 거도 뭐 되네 야부래라 야 대치깔에 가본도 손이 드린 이제 좀 대사지라 손아 대코랑 섬쳐 빼 야부래 되네 되네 나란 속에 단다 gombe menga 있나야 렘베 코람 랑니 tomsi 요래라 되네 나랑 그 간다 대사트는 라감네 대림베림베 마음 발감트바 용그래 라 되네 야부시더래.
Well, first of all, about the cultivation of impartial love and compassion by Tibetans. Some Tibetans are able to develop impartial love and compassion, and some can't. But hopefully those who can't are trying to. About your situation, you are facing, based on what you said, regularly facing tremendous aggression in your environment. And in that kind of situation, to even have the aspiration to be compassionate for the aggressors is already really good. In a sense, you're way ahead of the game already. So if you choose to remain in that situation in which you regularly encounter aggression and greed and so on, and do your best to cultivate compassion as best you can, then that would be a very good thing. Or if you choose to remove yourself from that environment or that situation and go somewhere where it is easier to cultivate impartial compassion because it's not as demanding in the beginning, that would also be a good thing. Either way is actually good. In the traditional teachings about the practice of taking and sending, there is a statement: the sequence of taking begins with oneself, which means that it's sometimes good to first go to a place where you can actually deal with things comfortably yourself, and then proceed step by step until you get to where you can respond compassionately to even the most intense aggression.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I have a question about the sending and receiving practice. Earlier in your talk, I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget. Earlier in your talk, you talked about problems with cultivating love and compassion without cultivating impartiality and discernment. And you said that one can increase the intensity of love and compassion for just a few, and then at the same time, that is without impartiality, also increase aversion to others. That was the problem there. And one can increase love and compassion or one's concern for others without increasing one's effectiveness if one lacks discernment and therefore become depressed at one's lack of effectiveness. Then later on you described the practice of Tonglen, sending and receiving. You talked about increasing intensity of love and compassion for those you already care about. But if the practice doesn't increase one's impartiality and discernment, it seems it would bring about anger and depression. I've been doing this practice, so I really want to know how it works. Does Tonglen bring about greater impartiality and discernment? And if so, how?
Dambo de zeneshige tre somba kaso de dambo de tanyom zeme gongo do songs. De magomna jamba da ninji zeme gomna yang kashela jamba da ninji shukchewa yong sigire shenda la shedang yong nyenka dawa yosong dona chakdang pelbe nyenka yosong. Nisena jamba da ninje pelbe kaso de sherab dan dempa chik pelna mato dene yimu yongwa ge chend jo sigire song. Then morong ke trawa ngoma de Tata Tongling ge tri sompe kapsa dene jamba da ninje ge yo kanyen pa chela migyo de zone jamba da ninje pelya ge Tongling ge mekpa gongge ores. De ngundu tangyom tseme tang sherab ma jongwa yena Tongling gompa la tene dene chagdang pelwa dang yimu pelwa yong sigi marebes.
단다 대 단다 지탕게 동점 세미 거야다 히랍던 템베 잠바던 니제 거야 대 지탕 따와게 온듯이 받아 보지라 되네 단다 나란속에 냠리 집이 값을라 디 따와 대다 덴바지기 때문에 되네 단다 대두 동ling 게 메바세나 되네 tel라 갈와 연구 말해라 디따와 때문에나 되네야 대시단다 된대게 양 가진다 본테 주게 년가 요래라 되네 인지 민지 디따와 대다 동녀치미 되네 강간 년보 임베게 따와 대다 되네 잠바던 인지 히라던 템바 임베게 따와 대다 덴베고네 되네 돈 단다 대두 돈에 게 메바가 데 베카지 그래
The statement that immeasurable impartiality and the cultivation of discernment need to, in the case of the first, precede, and in the case of the second, accompany the development of love and compassion, is basically a description of the cultivation of the fundamental outlook or view of cultivating love and compassion. The impartiality needs to be cultivated as a view that forms the basis or foundation of love and compassion. And discernment needs to be present as a view in the sense of a context for love and compassion. The practice of taking and sending is a technique or method which is to be practiced with that view and in that context. So if you practice taking and sending with the view of impartiality and in the context of discernment, it will not lead to a situation of attachment and aversion. On the other hand, if you practice taking and sending lacking that view and lacking that context, then yes, there could be problems. So we'll end by making good aspirations.
alam trabaya seben zole